She looked up and whispered, "Don't get in the Mustang." And that's how a 6-year-old saved a billionaire's life. The sun rose over Los Angeles with a deceptive warmth, casting golden light over the sleek rooftops and gleaming windows of the affluent neighborhoods tucked into the hills. It was a picture-perfect morning, the kind that made everything seem calm, orderly, safe. But inside the grand stone estate of Jonathan Reed, something unseen had already begun to shift. Jonathan descended the staircase with the confidence of a man who owned the world. Tall, broad-shouldered, dressed immaculately in a tailored navy suit, he looked every bit the billionaire CEO the business world revered. His brown eyes, sharp and composed, scanned the foyer as he twirled the keys to his brand-new Mustang GT in his hand. It was a gift to himself, a reward after signing a global tech deal worth over $300 million. Life, by all appearances, was going perfectly. Waiting quietly at the base of the stairs was his daughter, 6-year-old Lily. She sat on the cold marble steps, clutching a worn-out teddy bear and swaying her legs as she watched her father. Her long blonde hair tumbled over her shoulders, and her light blue eyes held a glimmer that lately seemed clouded by something more serious than any 6-year-old should carry. She wore a delicate pale pink dress with tiny embroidered flowers and matching shoes that sparkled just a little when the light hit them. Jonathan barely noticed her at first. His phone buzzed, and he glanced down, distracted. Emails, stock updates, a calendar reminder about an upcoming board meeting. Routine, important, until a small voice broke through. "Daddy?" He looked up and offered a quick smile. "Hey, sweetheart, you're up early. Want me to bring you something back from the bakery?" Lily shook her head, her grip tightening on the bear. "Don't go." Jonathan blinked, surprised. "Why not? It's just a coffee run. I'll be back in 15. Lily stood now, her voice suddenly firmer, her small fists clenched. "Don't get in the Mustang." He laughed gently, trying to lighten her mood. "What's this about? Are you worried I'll drink too much espresso again and talk too fast all day?" She didn't smile. In fact, her eyes began to fill with tears. "I heard her. In the garden. She was talking on the phone." "Who?" he asked, stepping closer, concern beginning to register on his face. "Your wife, Ashley." Lily's voice cracked as she spoke the name. "She said you'd crash. That today it ends." Jonathan froze in place. He stared at his daughter as if she'd just spoken a foreign language. "What did you hear exactly, Lily?" "She was talking to someone. I was hiding by the treehouse. She said, he'll get in the car and he won't come back out." Then she laughed and said she would have everything once it's done. The words hit Jonathan like a bucket of ice. He knew Ashley had been distant lately, cold even. But this? No, this was absurd. This had to be some sort of misunderstanding. A child's imagination, perhaps fed by something overheard on TV or misunderstood in passing. But Lily wasn't blinking, and what chilled him to the core wasn't just her words. It was the sound of her voice, the way she had said, "He won't come back out." It was the same inflection, the same tone he used to hear from Kate. Kate. The name hit him like a whisper from a dream. His first wife, Lily's mother, taken from them in a sudden plane crash 6 years ago. A tragedy that had nearly destroyed him. The woman who had once been the center of his world, and whose spirit now seemed to echo through their daughter's voice. Jonathan's hand lowered, keys dangling motionless. "Come inside," he said quietly to Lily, guiding her gently by the shoulder. He glanced out the tall glass windows toward the Mustang parked in the driveway. Its paint gleamed under the sun like polished armor. Nothing looked wrong. Nothing was out of place. But his gut twisted. Within minutes, he had his head mechanic on the line and asked him to come to the house immediately to inspect the car. No explanations given. He told Lily to stay inside and went to his office to wait, heart pounding. What if she was right? He didn't want to believe it, but he also didn't want to be the man who ignored his daughter's cry for help. Outside, the city moved as always, indifferent, fast, unforgiving. But inside the Reed estate, something had cracked. And Jonathan Reed, billionaire, CEO, and master of control, was about to lose everything he thought he understood about the people closest to him. The mechanic arrived less than 30 minutes later, driving up the long driveway in a plain black truck. Bearing no logo, Jonathan had requested absolute discretion. The man, Mike, had been with the company for over 15 years and had earned Jonathan's trust long before luxury replaced practicality in his garage. He didn't ask many questions, only raised an eyebrow when Jonathan met him at the door with uncharacteristic urgency. "I need you to inspect the Mustang," Jonathan said quietly, gesturing toward the sleek car parked near the front steps. "Specifically the brakes. Don't let anyone see you. And don't mention anything to Ashley." Mike didn't hesitate. "Understood." Lily sat by the window in the study, her small fingers curled around the edge of the cushion as she watched Mike kneel by the driver's side wheel. She didn't say anything, didn't move. Her father had listened to her. That was more than she'd hoped for. But still, doubt gnawed at her. What if she had misunderstood? What if Daddy thought she was making it up? Upstairs, Ashley was still in bed. Jonathan had told her he was going out for coffee, same as always, and she had murmured something half asleep and uninterested. He had left the door open a crack, just in case she decided to get up. The minutes passed in silence until Mike returned, his face more tense than usual. Jonathan met him near the garage, far from the main windows. "I didn't want to believe it," Mike said, wiping grease from his gloves. "But she's right. Rear brake lines have been cut. Sloppy job, but effective. One press on the pedal and you'd have had about 3 seconds before total failure. On a city hill, you wouldn't have made it." Jonathan's stomach turned violently. He ran a hand over his jaw, trying to process the weight of the confirmation. His daughter, his 6-year-old, had just saved his life. "She said she overheard Ashley talking to someone," he murmured, "talking about the car. About finishing something." Mike frowned, not hiding his disbelief. "You think your wife—" Jonathan didn't answer. He didn't have to. He went back into the house with a surreal calm. His footsteps were slow, calculated, as if the wrong step might shatter the floor beneath him. He found Lily still curled up by the window. When she saw him, she stood immediately. "You believe me," she whispered. He knelt down, placing his hands gently on her shoulders. "Yes, I believe you. You were very brave." She exhaled as if she'd been holding her breath since morning. "Is your car okay?" "It is now. Because of you." Just then, footsteps echoed down the staircase. Ashley appeared in a silky black robe, her hair pinned neatly, her face already made up despite the early hour. Her eyes flicked between the two of them. "What's going on?" Jonathan stood slowly, turning to face her with a stillness that was more intimidating than fury. "I had Mike check the Mustang," he said. "The brake lines were cut." Ashley blinked. For the briefest moment, something flashed across her expression. Surprise, annoyance, panic. But it vanished just as quickly. "Cut? Are you serious?" "I'm very serious." She laughed softly, almost too easily. "You think someone tried to sabotage your car in broad daylight?" "Jonathan, that's absurd." "Lily overheard your phone call this morning," he said flatly. "She heard what you said about me getting in the car and not coming out. She heard you say you'd have everything once it was done." Ashley's eyes darted to Lily. Her lips parted slightly. "You're trusting the word of a 6-year-old?" "I'm trusting the child who just saved my life. The child whose mother would never have let this happen if she were still alive." Ashley's voice rose. "You think I would hurt you? For what? Some inheritance I don't even need?" Jonathan didn't blink. "You changed the prenup 2 months ago. Pushed it through with a lawyer I now know was previously disbarred for misconduct. If I had died in a tragic accident, you would have inherited everything. The board would have granted you a payout in my name. My will was untouched. You'd walk away with more money than you could spend in 10 lifetimes." Her face hardened. "You have no proof." "I have fingerprints on the brake system. I have Mike's testimony. I have Lily's recording." That last sentence silenced the room. Ashley's expression flickered. For the first time, her confidence cracked. "What recording?" she said, her voice low. "I gave Lily Kate's old phone last week," Jonathan said. "She pressed record when she heard you in the garden. Her instinct wasn't to run or cry, it was to document." "You taught her that, Ashley, with your paranoia about reputation and secrets." The silence between them thickened. Then Jonathan took out his phone and dialed 911. Ashley stepped back, breath catching, but made no move to run. Perhaps she knew there was nowhere to go. As the operator picked up, Jonathan calmly explained what had happened, what had been discovered, and that the suspect was in the house. Ashley didn't say another word. When the police arrived, Lily clutched Jonathan's hand tightly, watching as her stepmother was handcuffed and led away. The mansion, once filled with quiet elegance and calculated charm, now echoed with a new truth. A 6-year-old girl had uncovered a murder attempt, and her father had nearly died without ever seeing it coming. But the worst was over. And for the first time, Jonathan felt the full weight of what he had almost lost, and the fragile, extraordinary strength of the little girl who saved him. The hours after Ashley's arrest passed in a haze of shock and slow-burning adrenaline. Jonathan sat in the den with Lily curled up beside him on the leather sofa, her small body nestled against his side. The television was on, playing one of her favorite animated movies, but neither of them was really watching. The sound was more background than distraction, a gentle hum beneath the storm of thoughts spinning in Jonathan's mind. He had spent the entire morning answering questions from the police. Officers had combed through the garage and examined the car again. They had taken Ashley's phone, secured the recording Lily had made, and gathered statements from both Jonathan and his daughter. It had all been surreal, like watching a thriller unfold around him. Except this wasn't fiction. This was his home, his wife, his daughter, his daughter. That word hit him with renewed force now. Lily, small and fragile looking in her soft pink dress, had done what seasoned men in boardrooms often failed to do. She had spoken up, clearly, bravely, when it mattered. She had trusted her instincts and trusted him enough to share something terrifying. She had saved him. And in the process, she had unknowingly revealed the depth of her emotional intelligence, something Jonathan had too long underestimated. He turned to look at her now. Her face was soft in the afternoon light, her cheeks flushed with the remnants of tension and fear. She hadn't cried since the moment Ashley was taken away. She had simply leaned into his side as if she needed to be reminded that he was still there, still alive, still hers. "Are you okay?" he asked gently, brushing a lock of blonde hair from her face. She nodded, but her voice was barely above a whisper. "Will she come back?" "No," Jonathan said firmly. "She can't hurt us anymore." Lily didn't respond right away. She stared at the television, her small fingers fiddling with the hem of her dress. "I didn't mean to ruin everything." Jonathan's heart ached. He pulled her closer. "You didn't ruin anything, Lily. You saved everything." "But you liked her," she said, still not looking at him. "You married her." There it was, the truth he hadn't even admitted to himself. He had married Ashley not out of love, not out of deep connection, but because it had seemed like the logical next step. She was beautiful, socially polished, and carried herself with the grace of someone who could navigate his world of power and prestige. But there had always been something distant in their connection, something performative. He had ignored the signs. He hadn't wanted to be alone anymore. And in doing so, he had brought danger into their home. "I made a mistake," he said quietly, "but the best decision I ever made was being your dad." She finally looked up at him. Her eyes were searching, cautious. "Even if I messed things up?" "You didn't mess anything up," he said, kissing the top of her head. "You were the only one brave enough to do the right thing. You protected me. You're the strongest person I know." She smiled then, a small, flickering smile, but real. He held on to it like a lifeline. Later that evening, the house grew still. The police were gone. The staff had been dismissed early. Jonathan wandered through the echoing halls, his mind replaying everything. Ashley's calculated coldness, the timing of the car sabotage, the phone call Lily had overheard. The layers of betrayal were deep, but one thing was clear. He had been blind, and his own daughter had opened his eyes. He found himself in the room that had once belonged to Kate. It had been preserved, unused, more out of guilt than nostalgia. Photos still lined the vanity. Kate with Lily as a baby, Kate holding Jonathan's hand on a beach, the two of them laughing during a New Year's Eve party before everything had changed. He picked up one frame and stared at the image. Kate mid-laugh, eyes full of life, completely unaware of what fate had planned. He missed her. Not in the abstract way grief sometimes becomes muted over the years, but acutely, painfully. He missed her guidance, her clarity. She would have seen through Ashley in a heartbeat. She would have protected Lily without hesitation. And yet, maybe, just maybe, her spirit had lived on through their daughter. Jonathan placed the frame back on the vanity and returned to the hallway. He passed by Lily's room and paused when he saw her door cracked open. She was inside, sitting at her little desk, coloring with serious focus. He knocked gently. "Hey," he said softly. She looked up and smiled. "Hi, Daddy." He stepped into the room and sat beside her. "What are you drawing?" "Us," she said, turning the paper to show him. There were three stick figures. One tall, with brown hair and a blue suit. One small, with long, yellow-blonde strands and a pink dress. The third figure had wings. Jonathan's throat tightened. "Who's that?" She pointed to the figure with wings. "That's Mommy. She was watching. I think she helped me here." Tears welled in his eyes, but he blinked them back. He smiled instead, pulling Lily into a hug. "I think she did too," he whispered. In that moment, surrounded by crayons and innocence, Jonathan understood something profound. Love, real love, didn't vanish with time or tragedy. It echoed forward, sometimes through the quiet courage of a little girl, sometimes through a whisper in a garden. It protected, it warned, it healed. And now it was his turn to protect Lily with everything he had. The following morning dawned quietly, with gray clouds hanging low over the hills and a chill in the air that hadn't been there the day before. Rain threatened, though it held off, lingering in the form of heavy, waiting silence. Jonathan stood in the kitchen of his sprawling home, pouring himself a cup of coffee with slow, deliberate movements. His usually pristine shirt sleeves were rolled up, and his eyes, often sharp, unreadable, now carried the weary dullness of someone who had not slept well. He looked up as Lily entered the room, her small footsteps pattering softly across the polished floors. She wore her favorite slippers, the ones shaped like tiny white rabbits, and a hoodie 3 sizes too big, one she had stolen from him months ago. She didn't say anything at first, just walked over to the table and climbed into her chair, tucking her legs beneath her. He placed a glass of orange juice in front of her without a word and sat down across from her. Neither of them needed to speak. Not yet. The house, once filled with Ashley's designer fragrance and carefully curated music playlists, now felt quiet in a different way. A cleaner way. It was the kind of quiet you got after a storm had passed, when the wreckage had settled and all you could do was begin to sift through what remained. "Did they take her away forever?" Lily finally asked, her voice small. Jonathan stirred his coffee slowly. "They'll hold her while they investigate, and then there will be a trial." "Will I have to go?" she asked, frowning. "Maybe, maybe not. But if you do, I'll be with you every step of the way." Lily didn't reply right away. She just nodded, then looked out the window, eyes scanning the gardens where she'd once played with Ashley, where her laughter had once echoed freely. That space felt different now. She didn't quite know what betrayal meant, but she understood enough. Ashley had tried to hurt the one person Lily loved most in the world. That was enough to shatter the illusion of safety a child should never have to lose. Later that day, Jonathan met with his legal team. He hadn't told Lily, but a deeper, uglier truth had surfaced after Ashley's arrest. A digital forensic audit had revealed that Ashley had not only altered the prenup, but had attempted to gain access to his company's internal files, posing as a board member. She had been gathering leverage, positioning herself as the grieving widow who would honor Jonathan's legacy while quietly planning to liquidate a portion of the company for her own gain. She would have dismantled everything he'd built. Her entire strategy was mapped out, his lead attorney told him. Emails, draft statements, financial reallocations, all prepared and hidden on an encrypted drive in her home office. She was planning this for months. Jonathan's jaw clenched, the muscles in his face tightening with the slow burn of rage. "She was going to destroy us." "Yes," the attorney confirmed. "And not just you. Lily's future, the foundation, every charitable initiative your company supports." Jonathan rubbed his temples and stood, pacing the length of the room. "We need to repair this. Every contract she touched, every executive she spoke with, we audit it. Immediately." The team nodded and dispersed quickly to begin damage control, but Jonathan remained still, lost in the implications. Ashley hadn't just tried to take his life. She'd aimed to erase the legacy he had started building for his daughter. And that, more than anything, was unforgivable. By the time he returned home that evening, he found Lily in her room drawing again. She was quieter these days, more thoughtful. But she looked up when he entered and smiled in that way that never failed to undo him completely. He sat down beside her without a word. She glanced at him, then back to her drawing. "Did you have a hard day?" He nodded. "Some of it." "Was it about her?" "Yes," he said honestly. Lily thought for a moment. Can I ask you something? Anything. Do you think she ever really loved us? The question hit harder than he expected. He swallowed, trying to find an answer that wasn't a lie but wouldn't break her heart further. I don't know. Maybe she thought she did. Or maybe she only loved what she thought we gave her. Money, power, control. But that's not real love. Lily looked down at her paper. Real love protects you, right? Jonathan reached over and gently tucked her hair behind her ear. Yes, it protects. It doesn't use you or put you in danger. And it never ever tries to hurt you. They sat there in silence, the kind that felt heavier than any words. He wanted to take all the pain away, to undo the betrayal, to give Lily a world where monsters didn't wear silk dresses and speak in calm voices. But he couldn't. All he could do was be there now, in every way he hadn't been when Ashley entered their lives in the first place. That night, he stood at Lily's doorway longer than usual after tucking her in. She had fallen asleep quickly, exhausted from the emotional weight of the past 2 days. He watched her for a moment, her chest rising and falling softly, her fingers still clutching her stuffed bear. The corner of her blanket pulled up to her chin. Jonathan closed the door gently and leaned against the wall outside her room. He knew now with absolute clarity what mattered. Not mergers, not net worth, not even reputation. Lily, his daughter, his family, his second chance. And this time, he would not fail them. 2 weeks had passed since Ashley's arrest, and the dust had begun to settle. But not completely. The headlines had faded from the front page, but whispers still lingered in business circles and charity galas. Jonathan had made a formal statement to the media, carefully crafted by his PR team, acknowledging the deeply personal betrayal and confirming his cooperation with the ongoing investigation. The tone was calm, dignified, controlled. But behind that statement was a man still reeling. He had retreated from public life almost entirely. Meetings were moved to virtual calls, appearances were canceled. And for the first time since founding Reed Technologies, he had handed over temporary operational control to his second-in-command. The board had protested at first, fearing market reactions. But Jonathan didn't care. His priority had changed. Drastically, he was spending every moment he could with Lily. They developed new routines together. Mornings began with pancakes made in a messy kitchen that once had a chef. Afternoons were filled with walks in the garden, arts and crafts, and stories read aloud under blankets. Evenings often ended with them curled up on the same couch, her head resting against his chest while a fire crackled nearby. It was simple. It was quiet. It was healing. But healing came in waves, not in straight lines. Some nights Lily would wake up crying, asking if Ashley was coming back. Other times she grew withdrawn, her eyes watching him with unspoken fear, like she wasn't sure if he would disappear too. Those moments pierced him the most, reminders that no matter how much he loved her, he hadn't protected her from the hurt. He was trying now, fiercely, but the past could not be undone. One evening, Jonathan found Lily sitting on the floor in the hallway, a cardboard box beside her. She had discovered it while exploring a storage closet. Inside were old photos, ones he hadn't seen in years, pictures of him and Kate, college photos, their wedding, the day Lily was born. Kate holding Lily for the first time, her face glowing with happiness and exhaustion. Lily looked up as he approached. Was Mommy really this pretty? Jonathan sat beside her, picking up the photo she held. She was beautiful, inside and out. I don't remember her voice, Lily said. I try, but it's all fuzzy. That's okay, he said softly. You were very young when she passed. Do you remember her voice? He nodded, his throat tightening. Every word. They looked through the photos together, memory by memory, Jonathan telling her stories about Kate's laugh, her stubbornness, the way she always added cinnamon to hot chocolate, even though she never liked it. He found himself smiling through the sadness, surprised by how good it felt to say her name out loud again. To remember her not as the woman he lost, but as the woman who lived so vibrantly beside him for so many years. You look like her, he said suddenly. Lily blinked. I do? Yes. Same eyes, same brave heart. She smiled, and this time it reached her whole face. She rested her head on his shoulder, and for a while they said nothing more. Later that night, after Lily had gone to bed, Jonathan stood in his office staring at the framed photo on his desk, the one of him, Kate, and baby Lily at the beach. The sky behind them was orange with sunset. The wind caught in Kate's hair, Lily swaddled in her arms. They looked like a future that hadn't yet been broken. He thought about how close he had come to losing it all again. Ashley had almost succeeded in ending his life, not just physically, but by cutting off the one true thing he had left of Kate, Lily. And if not for Lily's voice that morning, if not for her courage, he would be gone. He couldn't go back. But he could start again. The next morning, he called the architect who had once designed Lily's nursery. This time, he had something different in mind. "I want a reading room," he said. "For her. A real space. Warm, full of light and books and stars on the ceiling." The architect was confused. "A library?" "No," Jonathan replied. "A sanctuary." Over the next few weeks, the old guest room at the end of the hallway was transformed. The windows were enlarged to flood the space with natural light. Shelves were built from floor to ceiling, filled with books of every kind: fairy tales, science, adventure, poetry. A small telescope was installed near the window. A reading nook shaped like a treehouse sat in one corner, and fiber optic lights were woven into the ceiling like constellations. When Lily saw it for the first time, she didn't speak. She just stepped inside slowly, turned in a slow circle and whispered, "It feels like magic." Jonathan crouched beside her. "That's because you are the magic, Lily." She threw her arms around his neck and held him tight, and he closed his eyes, feeling her small heartbeat against his chest. He knew now that life wasn't about perfect control. It was about presence, about choosing every day to show up for the people who matter. He had almost lost everything, but somehow, because of a little girl's voice, he had found it again. The day of the court hearing arrived like a thundercloud, dark, heavy, inevitable. Though it was technically a preliminary proceeding to determine the direction of the trial, the weight of the moment bore down on Jonathan more than any board meeting, corporate merger, or public scandal ever had. This wasn't just about legality. It was about truth. It was about what his daughter had lived through and what she had saved him from. Jonathan sat in the courtroom, his blue suit neatly pressed, his expression unreadable. But beneath his composed exterior, his heart was pounding. Lily sat beside him, holding his hand, her feet not quite reaching the floor from the tall bench. She wore a white cardigan over a soft pink dress, her blonde hair neatly brushed and held back with a pale ribbon. She looked calm, but he could feel the tension in her fingers as they gripped his. Behind them, the room filled with whispers. Ashley sat on the opposite side, flanked by her attorney. She looked different now, smaller somehow. Her once effortless beauty felt brittle under the courtroom lights. She wore black again, this time a fitted blazer, not a silk robe. Her expression was cold, but her eyes darted nervously every time someone looked her way. The judge entered, and the room silenced immediately. The hearing began with routine statements: charges, case outlines, legal procedures. Jonathan hardly heard them. He was focused on Lily, who hadn't said a word all morning. He had offered to let her stay home, had told her that she didn't have to come, but she had insisted. "I want them to hear it from me," she'd said. When the judge finally asked if any testimony would be given, Lily's name was called. The room grew still. Jonathan looked down at her. "Are you sure?" She nodded. He stood with her, walked her to the front of the courtroom, and placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder before sitting back down. A clerk helped her climb up onto the witness chair, where her legs swung nervously under the seat. She was so small behind the wide wooden desk, so visibly fragile in this formal, adult world. And yet, when she spoke, her voice rang clear. "My name is Lily Reed," she began. "I'm 6. I live with my dad." The judge offered a kind smile. "Thank you for being here today, Lily. Can you tell us what happened?" Lily nodded. "I heard Ashley. She was in the garden. I was hiding behind the treehouse. She was talking on the phone. She said Daddy was going to drive the Mustang and not come back. She said she would get everything." There was a rustle of shocked murmurs in the courtroom. The judge held up a hand for silence. "And what did you do then?" "I waited," Lily said. "I waited for Daddy to come out. When he did, I told him not to get in the car. I said she broke it. I said it was dangerous." Jonathan watched as her eyes flicked over to Ashley. There was no hatred in them, just a quiet, steady sadness that made Ashley's face flinch. The prosecutor asked, "Did anyone teach you what to say today?" Lily shook her head. "No." I just wanted my dad to live. Those 7 words, so simple, so powerful, echoed through the courtroom like thunder. Jonathan blinked rapidly, pressing his lips together to keep his emotions from breaking the surface. Across the aisle, Ashley looked away. There was a pause as the judge took notes, then gently thanked Lily for her courage. The clerk helped her step down, and she ran immediately back to her father's arms. He caught her, pulled her into his lap, and held her tight. She trembled just a little, but her breathing steadied as she buried her face in his chest. "You were perfect," he whispered into her hair. "I'm so proud of you." The judge called for a brief recess. Outside in the hallway, reporters swarmed behind velvet ropes, trying to catch a glimpse of the family at the heart of a story that had captured headlines for weeks. But Jonathan kept his arm wrapped protectively around Lily and didn't answer a single question. This wasn't for public consumption. This was a family surviving something that could have broken them. Back inside, the hearing resumed with statements from both legal teams. Ashley's attorney tried to argue lack of motive, suggesting that the mechanical damage to the vehicle was inconclusive and that Lily's testimony, while emotional, could be misinterpreted due to her age. But the evidence was strong. The recording, the fingerprint analysis, the forged documents, all of it painted a clear and damning picture. By the end of the session, the judge confirmed the case would go to full criminal trial. Ashley would face charges of attempted murder, fraud, and conspiracy. Jonathan left the courthouse carrying Lily in his arms, her head resting on his shoulder. She had fallen asleep, emotionally spent. He kissed her temple and whispered words of comfort she was too tired to hear. That night, as she slept peacefully in her bed, Jonathan stood by the window of her new reading room, looking out at the night sky. The stars above blinked quietly, and in the distance the city sparkled as if nothing had happened. But everything had changed. His daughter had stared down betrayal and danger, and had spoken the truth with a courage beyond her years. And in doing so, she had reminded him what strength really looked like. Not in boardrooms, not in bank accounts, but in a 6-year-old girl who just wanted her daddy to live. Weeks turned into months, and the storm that had once engulfed the Reed household began to give way to a new kind of quiet. It wasn't silence born of fear or tension. It was the calm of rebuilding, of learning to live differently. Life for Jonathan and Lily was no longer about perfection. It was about presence, and that changed everything. Jonathan had not returned to the boardroom, not really. He took a step back from Reed Technologies, not because he couldn't lead, but because he realized that the empire he'd built meant nothing if he didn't have a life outside of it. One rooted in family, one he could share with Lily. He appointed a trusted executive to run day-to-day operations and took on a quieter role, working only part-time. He canceled his overseas trips. His assistant learned quickly not to schedule meetings after 3:00 p.m. That was when Lily came home from school. Each day when she walked through the door, her backpack bouncing and her cheeks rosy from laughter, Jonathan felt a kind of joy he hadn't known he was capable of feeling. He met her at the door, helped her with her coat, asked about her day, and listened. Not with half his attention, not distracted, fully. She told him about her art projects, about a new friend named Natalie who liked space, about the boy who traded his pudding for her markers. Her stories filled their home with color, with noise, with life. Lily's therapist said it was important to let her process what had happened at her own pace. Jonathan took that to heart. Sometimes she talked about Ashley, briefly, matter-of-factly. "I think she was sad inside," she said one night. Like broken sad. Other times she avoided the subject entirely. Jonathan never pressed her. He simply reminded her every day that she was safe, that she was loved, and that none of it had ever been her fault. They began new traditions, ones they created together. Friday was silly sock day, no exceptions. Sunday mornings were for blueberry pancakes and long walks in the park. On Wednesday nights, they read books under the stars in her new reading room, whispering about planets and heroes and faraway kingdoms, until she fell asleep under the soft glow of the ceiling's twinkling fiber optic lights. But perhaps the most meaningful change came one quiet afternoon in April. Jonathan stood in his office, reviewing documents for a philanthropic venture he'd been quietly developing. The Kate Foundation, named in honor of Lily's mother, was ready to launch. Its mission to provide resources and emotional support to children who had lost a parent. Not just funds, but therapy, mentorship, books, and spaces for kids to speak and be heard. Lily's story had become its inspiration. He called her into his office. She came in holding a sketch pad, her hair in a loose braid, a smudge of paint on her sleeve. "What's up?" "I want to show you something," he said. He handed her a glossy brochure. On the front was a drawing she had done, one he had secretly submitted to the design team. It was a picture of a small child holding hands with a parent under a big tree, with the words, "You are not alone," written underneath. Her eyes widened. "That's mine." "It is. I want to use your drawing for the foundation, for the work we're going to do." She sat down beside him. "Work?" Jonathan nodded. "We're going to help other kids who've lost a mom or a dad. Kids like you. And we're going to remind them that they still have hope, that they're still surrounded by love." Lily didn't say anything right away. Then she reached over, hugged him tightly and whispered, "Mom would like that." "I think so too," he said, holding her close. Together they planned the launch event. Lily insisted it be held in the garden, the one where everything had nearly fallen apart. "We should make new memories there," she said with quiet wisdom beyond her years. On the day of the launch, the garden was transformed. Fairy lights hung from the trees. Tables were covered in bright cloths. Art supplies scattered for the children who came. There were music, stories, and laughter. And when Jonathan gave his speech, he didn't talk about being a CEO. He didn't talk about wealth or business. He talked about Lily. He told the story of a little girl who had heard a terrible truth and had been brave enough to speak it. A little girl who had saved her father's life, not with strength, but with love. And how that act had reminded him what truly matters. When he stepped down from the podium, Lily ran to him and took his hand, and the audience applauded not just for him, but for her. That night, as they stood alone under the stars, Jonathan whispered, "You changed everything, Lily." She smiled up at him. "I just wanted you to be here, for all of it." And now he was, every day, for all of it. Summer came quietly that year, slipping into their lives like a warm breeze through an open window. The sky seemed bluer, the air lighter, and in the Reed household, peace had finally rooted itself. Not the shallow kind that came from appearances or wealth, but a peace earned through pain, reflection, and the fierce devotion between a father and daughter who had been through more than most. By now, the case against Ashley had gone to trial and concluded swiftly. The evidence was overwhelming. Fingerprints, audio recordings, and forged documents that showed clear intent. She was found guilty on all counts and sentenced to 20 years in prison without parole. The courtroom had been filled with whispers, camera shutters, and the cold scent of justice. But Jonathan and Lily had not attended the sentencing. They didn't need to hear the final gavel to know the story was over. That chapter, with all its darkness and betrayal, had closed. Instead, on the day of the verdict, Jonathan took Lily to the beach. It was the same beach from one of the old photographs, where he, Kate, and baby Lily had once stood, smiling beneath a painted sky. Now, years later, he and his daughter walked along that same shoreline, the surf gently tugging at their feet, the wind tangling Lily's golden hair as she skipped ahead, twirling in the sand. She turned to him suddenly, barefoot and sunlit, her eyes reflecting the sea. "Do you think she's watching us?" Jonathan smiled faintly. "I do." They sat for hours building a sandcastle, laughing when the waves crashed too close and washed part of it away. And in that simple act, something deeply profound was reborn. Joy, fragile and unguarded. Back home, life took on new meaning. Jonathan, once defined by quarterly reports and press releases, now centered his days around Lily. He became involved with local schools, volunteering to read to children on Fridays. He hosted community events through the Kate Foundation, personally attending everyone. The media called it a remarkable transformation, but Jonathan ignored the headlines. He didn't need to be praised for doing what he should have been doing all along. What mattered most was Lily. Her therapist remarked often on her emotional strength, her resilience. "She's made tremendous progress," she said during one session. "But more than that, she trusts again. That's rare after what she went through." And it was true. Lily had found her laughter again. She giggled when Jonathan burned pancakes or tripped over her toys. She sang while brushing her teeth and invented dramatic bedtime stories featuring talking cats and secret forests. She was thriving, not because the world was perfect, but because someone had finally given her the space to be a child again. One evening in August, just as twilight draped the city in lavender shadows, Jonathan and Lily sat on the back patio with ice cream cones in hand. The garden, once the backdrop for whispered betrayal, was now filled with life. Butterflies fluttered among the flowers Lily had helped plant. A fountain bubbled nearby. Soft lights glowed from lanterns hanging in the trees. Lily leaned against his shoulder and licked her ice cream thoughtfully. "Do you miss your old life?" she asked. "When you were always working?" Jonathan chuckled. "No, not even a little. Not even the fancy parties?" "Especially not the fancy parties," he said with a grin. She giggled. "Me neither." He looked down at her, his heart swelling with emotion too big for words. "This is the best part of my life, Lily. Right here, right now, with you." She smiled and took his hand. "Good, because I don't want you to go anywhere ever again." "I'm not going anywhere," he promised. "Not ever." And he meant it. Later that night, after Lily was tucked into bed beneath the soft lights of her starry ceiling, Jonathan stood in her doorway for a long time, watching her breathe, watching the rise and fall of her tiny chest. There had been a time not long ago when he had almost lost this, almost lost her, almost lost himself, but he hadn't, because of her. She had pulled him back from the brink not with force, but with a voice, a simple, scared little voice saying, "Don't get in the Mustang." And because she spoke, because he listened, they were here, whole, together. As he turned off the hallway light and walked away, he didn't feel like a billionaire, or a CEO, or a man with power. He felt like a father. And for the first time in a long, long while, that was enough. This story ends not with fireworks or grand victories, but with something far more powerful: quiet redemption. At its heart, it's about a man rediscovering what truly matters, and a little girl who, despite her age, had the courage to speak a truth that saved them both. The arc from betrayal and danger to healing and trust is deeply human. What makes the ending so moving is its emotional honesty. Jonathan doesn't just survive, he changes. And Lily, instead of being a silent bystander, becomes the emotional center of the story. Their bond feels earned, not forced. There's pain, yes, but it leads somewhere beautiful. In a world where we're so often distracted by success, image, or control, this ending reminds us the greatest legacy isn't wealth or power, it's the love we show, the people we choose, and the courage to start again.